village was wiped out in the battle against the demon lord. A little boy named Lloyd is standing in front of the ruins, and the haunted look in his eyes reveals the deep trauma he's endured. When a woman discovers him standing amidst the ruins, she's overwhelmed with guilt, knowing that her own negligence caused the devastation. Wanting to make amends, she brings Lloyd into her home and offers him a new life. While he stays with her, she also begins teaching him the art of magic. Her first lesson for Lloyd is the flame spell. She briefly demonstrates the spell, then tells Lloyd that if he can't figure out how to cast it by himself, he won't be getting any dinner that day. Miraculously, by nightfall, Lloyd succeeds in producing a tiny flame, yet when he presents it to his master, instead of praising him, she extinguishes it with a breath, and then snaps her fingers to engulf him in a wall of fire, scolding him for not doing it properly. Still, she allows him to eat dinner since he did manage to learn the spell. The next day, his master changes things up and tells Lloyd that he'll be learning water magic. She gives a brief demonstration. She sweeps her foot along the ground to create a small spout of water. When it's Lloyd's turn to try, he manages to slightly dampen the ground and looks quite pleased with himself, but his master isn't impressed at all. To show him what real water magic looks like, she dumps a massive amount of water on him. As time passes, Lloyd's training carries on, with him putting in his best effort to learn new spells, while Merlin dishes out harsh punishments whenever he falls short. But surprisingly, her tough methods actually pay off. When winter arrives, Lloyd's magic has improved so much that he can summon a snow sculpture of Merlin with little effort. It was a kind gesture, and although she appreciates it, she refuses to show it. Instead, she takes over the snow sculpture, uses it to grab Lloyd, and dramatically enlarges it to demonstrate true mastery over ice magic. The sculpture eventually collapses, causing Lloyd to fall. Still, by now, the two share a strong mutual understanding. As soon as he pulls himself out of the snow, Lloyd tells Merlin he'll put more effort into his magic, and she responds with a smile of approval. Some time passes, and one morning Merlin is sprawled out on her couch, nursing a hangover from drinking too much wine the night before. Lloyd comes by to check on her and asks if she's okay, but she groans and tells him she feels absolutely awful. Wanting to help, Lloyd places his hand on her forehead and uses his healing magic to ease her hangover. Within seconds, Merlin feels significantly better. She sits up, gives Lloyd a hug, and thanks him for the healing. Now that she's feeling like herself again, she declares it's time to resume his magic training, then promptly drags him back outside. This continues for several months. Then, one day, Merlin gets a book that deeply worries her. At that moment, Lloyd knocks on her door to call her for dinner. She replies that she'll be right there and begins to put the book aside. But as she does, she accidentally drops it in front of Lloyd. He stoops to pick it up, and the moment his hands touch it, a rush of knowledge instantly fills his mind. Lloyd collapses from the overwhelming flood of information. When Merlin realizes what's happened, she's stunned. He possesses the traits of the Chosen One. For now, she carries him to bed, but if he truly is the prophesied one, she can't allow him to repeat her past mistakes. With a gentle kiss on his forehead, a soft glow lingers as she casts a spell on him. She refuses to let Lloyd grow arrogant with his power, just as she once did. The following day, Lloyd's training carries on, and this time, his master brings him into the forest to practice his white magic. He focuses his power on a single fruit, making it ripen and become juicy. Impressed, his master compliments him on his progress. However, she also wants to remind him there's still much more to learn. Placing her hand on the tree, she casts white magic and causes the whole tree to flourish with vibrant greenery. That night, Merlin assists Lloyd with his studies and tells him that some orcs possess rare magic capable of controlling monsters. As they read, Lloyd comes across a mention of ancient magic, but the moment he brings it up, Merlin's expression changes, and she firmly tells him that he doesn't need to learn anything about ancient magic. One of her training drills involves summoning a magic staff in an instant. When Lloyd fails to react swiftly enough, Merlin strikes him down with her own staff. She sternly warns him that he must never grow complacent in his practice. No matter how strong he gets, Lloyd Lloyd vows to stay committed and never slack in his training. For their next lesson, Merlin teaches Lloyd about magic stones. She explains that these stones are solidified concentrations of mana, so potent that they can transform nearby objects into magic stones too. A few months pass, and during one of Merlin's lessons, she brings Lloyd deep into the wilderness, hands him a knife, and tells him he has to survive in the forest and find his way back home alone within 1 week. Before he can protest, she takes off running, leaving him stranded. Not long after she disappears, a huge wolf emerges from the trees and launches an attack on Lloyd. Lloyd flees for his life and ends up climbing a tree to escape the wolf. He doubts that a white mage like him has the power to take down such a beast, so his best bet is to make it back home without running into any more monsters. However, when he uses magic to scan his surroundings and figure out the right path, he realizes just how far he's wandered. With no other option, he begins carefully making his way through the forest, and once night falls, he uses the time to study his spells, trying to improve them as much as he can. Days pass with their usual routine, until one moment, Lloyd snaps a branch underfoot, alerting a massive spider to his location. Heart-pounding, he bolts in the opposite direction, casting a haste spell to surge ahead of the creature. After a long and exhausting journey, he finally reaches home safely, only to collapse from fatigue right outside the door. When Merlin finds him, she's genuinely proud of him for making it back alone, proving his resilience. Several more years pass, and one day while Lloyd is cleaning, he spots a book on Merlin's desk about a town. Curious, he asks if he can borrow it, and she tells him to keep it. By now, Lloyd has essentially finished his training, so he's no longer subjected to her non-stop lessons. However, every other day she still ropes him into helping her create new spells, since his knack for magic development is exceptional. Lloyd doesn't mind though. He's happy she finally sees him as an equal. However, he hasn't slept at all in the past few days, as Merlin forces him to stay awake every night for magical experiments. The relentless demands are wearing on him, and his fascination with town life only grows. Eventually, he decides to take bold action. The following morning, Merlin goes up to Lloyd's room to request his assistance with more magical studies. However, she's shocked to find him missing. Based on the book left open on his desk, she can guess exactly where he is. Meanwhile, Lloyd reaches the town and is instantly impressed by the bustling activity around him. This being his first time in such a place, after buying a simple loaf of bread, he realizes he's completely broke and needs work fast. Just then, a poster advertising for adventurers flies right into his face. Without hesitation, Lloyd decides to apply. The whole time, a cloaked man has been secretly tailing Lloyd, clearly interested in the decision he just made. After Lloyd officially joins the adventurers party, he and his new teammates head to the castle to battle a huge cyclops. When the fight gets tough, the party leader, Alan, tells the healer, Sheena, to restore his health, but just as she's about to act, Lloyd silently casts his advanced stat buff spell, instantly making everyone feel stronger and revitalized. None of them realize it was Lloyd's doing. He never says a word. After the buff takes effect, the archer lands a shot right in the Cyclops' eye, and then Rena uses her shield to block one of its punches. Surprised by how effortlessly she managed it, Alan, on the other hand, doesn't question his sudden increase of power and confidently finishes off the Cyclops, fully convinced it was all thanks to his own power. But Rena appears to have picked up on the fact that Lloyd had something to do with their unexpected boost. With the Cyclops defeated, the party returns to town, where Alan is celebrated as a hero. Apparently, the creature was so formidable that no one else had managed to take it down. The reward for the feat turns out to be enormous, but Alan hands Lloyd a mere 5 gold coins, claiming the low amount is due to him being just a rookie D-rank adventurer. Lloyd takes the money without protest, but when Alan suggests a toast to the party's victory, Lloyd excuses himself because he doesn't want to be involved. The party's mage, Maya, gets offended that Lloyd doesn't want to drink with them, but Alan tells her it's fine since they can always hire another white mage, and it's not like he contributed much to the party's performance anyway. Back at Merlin's home, the mysterious man from earlier appears, and Merlin questions him about Lloyd's whereabouts. The man informs her that Lloyd made it to town, and has already joined a famous party. Relieved to hear he's safe, Merlin reflects that it was time for him to explore the world independently. As long as he doesn't grow overconfident like she once did in her youth, she believes he'll be just fine. The man asks if she still carries any regrets about that day. Merlin's expression twists with bitterness as she recalls her mistake. At the time, she hadn't foreseen the Demon Lord's willingness to self-destruct just to obtain the grimoire. That single miscalculation led to the destruction of an entire village, instantly wiping out everyone nearby, including Merlin herself. Luckily, her companion Sybil managed to bring everyone back using forbidden ancient magic, but the cost was his own life. Since then, Merlin has never stopped blaming herself. Back in Lloyd's ongoing adventures with the hero party, he continues to quietly support them. Whenever Alan or the others run into trouble during a fight, Lloyd is always there, casting buffs to give them an edge. Thanks to his efforts, the team maintains an almost flawless win streak, with everyone consistently performing at their best. Yet none of them realized just how much of the load Lloyd is actually carrying. That night, Rena is studying defensive techniques when Alan barges into her room, curious about what she's doing. She explains that she's a bit confused because monster attacks haven't been hitting her shield as hard as before. Alan agrees, saying he's been feeling the same thing, but just assumed it was his natural skill kicking in. Rena points out that he hasn't been training much lately, so his sudden strength boost doesn't make sense. Meanwhile, deep in the forest that night, a group of guards were wrapping up their patrol when, without warning, one of them let out a cry of agony. The others turned just in time to see a huge earth golem looming above him. In that instant, one of the guards knew this was the end for him. The following morning, the guard captain approaches Alan to request his assistance. He explains that the guards who were on patrol last night were savagely killed. Without hesitation, Alan agrees to help, assuming that taking down a golem should be a simple task. Later that afternoon, they follow Lloyd's tracking magic to trace the earth golem to a cave hidden behind a waterfall. With Lloyd still providing magical support, they make quick work of the stone monster. However, a demon summons another golem from the falling rocks above, forcing them back into battle. Lloyd examines the demon more closely and notices that it's using a staff embedded with a magic stone to control the golem. Knowing how dangerous magic stones can be, he realizes he has to act fast before things spiral out of control. He casts a precision spell and tells Lulu to shoot an arrow at the demon. Caught off guard by Lloyd's sudden command, Lulu hesitates for a moment but follows through. Miraculously, her arrow manages to pierce through and hit the target. Lloyd then instructs Mia to teleport the staff to him. As soon as it's in his hands, he quickly casts a spell to seal its magic. Meanwhile, Alan is growing irritated that Lloyd keeps giving commands, even though he's supposed to be the one in charge. Frustrated, Alan tries to reclaim authority by rushing in to land the killing strike on the golem himself. Lloyd refuses to let Alan die, so he enhances his own speed with magic and shoves Alan aside just before the golem crushes him. But instead of gratitude, Alan snaps at Lloyd for interfering, ignoring the fact that he was just saved. He then goes on to deliver the final blow to the golem. Once they all return to town, Alan, still pissed off, decides to fire Lloyd for being a nuisance. Alan also accuses him of being lazy and never contributing to the team, and after years of hearing from Merlin that his abilities were useless, Lloyd instinctively assumes the problem must be him. He accepts being kicked out of the party without arguing, and over the next 3 days, he searches for a new party to join. Unfortunately, it proves to be tough. Most parties already have a white mage. However, by chance, a girl at the reception desk is desperately asking the guild receptionist for a white mage. Right then, the receptionist points toward Lloyd, and the moment the girl spots him, she rushes over, grabs his hand, and forces him to join her party. Yui pulls Lloyd along to introduce him to her party, and they're caught off guard by how quickly she returned. They figure she must have come back empty-handed, assuming it'd be nearly impossible to find a new white mage so quickly. But then Yui surprises them by pointing at Lloyd and announcing that he'll be joining the team. But the thing is that she never actually explained any of this to Lloyd, so he never agreed to join in the first place. The others suspected it was too good to be true. They tell Yui they should just abandon the quests they were were planning to take since they can't complete it without a white mage. Plus, there's no telling if Lloyd is even capable of filling Clum's role. Everyone agrees that going through with the quest in their current state would be too dangerous. Still, Yui doesn't want to back out because their client is depending on them, and she truly wants to help. Lloyd isn't fully aware of the situation, but he understands the quest is crucial. He suggests letting another party take it instead. However, they explain that no one else is free to handle it. It's an A-rank quest, meaning only a rank or higher parties can accept it. Unfortunately, all the A-rank parties in the capital are already occupied with other missions, leaving no one available. Yui's party is S-rank, so they technically qualify for the mission. However, without their usual white mage, they'd need a replacement. The problem is, guild regulations only permit parties to work with officially registered members, meaning they can't just temporarily recruit a white mage from another group. And with such little time, finding a skilled white mage is nearly impossible. Lloyd really wants to support them, but he honestly believes he's not powerful enough to contribute to an S-rank party. Before he can voice his doubts, Yui confidently insists that everything will work out as long as Lloyd is with them. They then bring him out to a field to evaluate his skills before officially adding him to their group. Despite the fact that Lloyd never actually agreed to participate in any of this, they take him out to a field where Yui asks Lloyd to show them what he can do. However, he's concerned that his abilities will fall short of their expectations, especially since they're S-rank like his master. Daggers steps in and tells Yui it's unfair to suddenly pressure Lloyd into demonstrating his power. If she's going to test him, the least she can do is be clear about which spell she wants him to use. Daggers makes a fair argument. Yui then turns to Lloyd and instructs him to cast enhancement magic on the entire group. Lloyd is surprised. The task seems too simple for an S-rank party's trial. To clarify, he asks Yui if she just wants him to buff everyone here. Yui confirms, but with one major condition: he must cast the spell on all of them simultaneously. Lloyd is even more puzzled because he's frequently used enhancement magic on multiple people without any trouble. For him, it's hardly a challenge, so why would this be considered a test? Initially, he suspects there might be some unspoken condition, but they simply want him to cast enhancement magic on them. In fact, they seem to doubt whether he can even manage such a simple task. They ask Lloyd if he's able to do it, and he says yes, though he's still confused about why the test seems so simple. He summons his staff and begins casting the enhancement spell, but Yui is more shocked by the fact that he summoned a staff out of thin air. She immediately asks him where it came from, and Lloyd casually explains that it was just a basic storage spell, so it's nothing special. What really matters to him is Yui's reaction to the enhancement magic he used on her. At first, she hadn't even noticed, but now that she reflects on it, she senses a slight boost in her strength. The others feel the effects too, though there's something unusual about it, different from ordinary enhancement magic. To test the effects, Yui draws her sword and casually swings at a tree. To her shock, the blade slices clean through the trunk with a single strike. She stares in disbelief, but Lloyd thinks the result is only natural given his enhancements. Yui and the others had assumed he would only use strength enhancements, but Lloyd felt that was too basic, so he went ahead and cast additional buffs for physical enhancement, defense, speed, and vitality. The others are completely floored by what he's capable of, frozen in place as they stare at him in shock. Lloyd mistakes their stunned silence for dissatisfaction, thinking he must have failed the test. He apologizes for taking up their time. Clearly, they wouldn't want a white mage like him in their group. Just as he turns to leave, Yui stops him. She can't possibly let someone with his skills walk away, and besides, she's curious to know more about him. She starts asking him a few questions and eventually learns that Lloyd used to be part of the hero party. Yui is surprised, seeing it as a big deal since the hero party is famous across the kingdom. However, Lloyd explains that he was let go because they thought he lacked strength, so he doesn't believe he was of much value to them. Daggers and the rest tell Lloyd it's unbelievable because they've never witnessed anyone use so many different enhancement spells at the same time. However, Lloyd insists that there are definitely people out there more powerful than him. He even suggests to Yui and the others that they should probably just bring back their previous white mage instead. instead. But that isn't really a choice for Yui's party, since their white mage, Clum, has a younger sister who's seriously ill. Until not long ago, Clum was juggling both adventuring and caring for her sister every day, which took a heavy toll on her. It got to the point where she couldn't concentrate during battles anymore, and that's ultimately why she decided to leave the party. Everyone is aware that Clum stepped down solely to avoid becoming a burden to the group. Though they're reluctant to let her leave, they understand and honor her choice. This is why they've been searching for another white mage to fill her role. Usually, they take quests without a white mage, but her rank missions are especially tough without a proper healer. Lloyd can sense how much the group cares for Clum, and he wants to help if possible, so he asks what illness Clum's sister has. Yui isn't entirely sure, but she knows it's a condition that's slowly transforming her sister's body into Magistone. Lloyd recalls reading that Magistone can spread its transformation to other objects, and he's been researching ways to reverse the effect, believing he might have a solution. He asks Yui to take him to Clum's house. Before long, they arrive. Clum is startled to find Yui and an unfamiliar face at her door, but she invites them inside to talk. Lloyd hesitates before asking, knowing his next question might come across as insensitive, but he needs to understand exactly how Clum's sister fell ill. Clum doesn't take offense and willingly shares the story. She explains that she and her sister Sylvie were longtime adventuring partners. Everything changed during one fateful mission when Sylvie was wounded and slipped into a coma, remaining unconscious ever since. Yui asks whether a monster attacked Sylvie, but Clum admits she doesn't actually know. When she found her sister, Sylvie was already unconscious. When Lloyd presses for details about her symptoms, Clum suggests it would be easier to show him the situation rather than explain it. She leads Yui and Lloyd to the door to Sylvie's bedroom, but she warns them to brace themselves because they may not be ready for what they are about to witness. As soon as Clum opens the door, Lloyd and Yui are hit with a wave of unpleasant mana, and it's all coming from Sylvie. Clum takes the covers off Sylvie's body and reveals that her arms and feet have already begun to transform. It's Lloyd's first time witnessing firsthand what Magistones can do to a person, and he's stunned by how severe it is. For some reason, Still's mana has become unstable, and it's gradually turning her body into Magistone. At this rate, it's only a matter of time before the transformation takes over completely. Lloyd asks Clum to let him take a look at Sylvie since he has something he wants to try, and if his hypothesis is correct, then he might be able to cure her. Clum finds it hard to believe that Lloyd would be able to cure Sylvie when all the best healers in the country could do nothing for her. Lloyd explains that Sylvie's condition is probably due to being pierced by a Magistone of very high purity. He then asks Clum if the cave where Sylvie was injured had a high mana concentration, and Clum confirms it did. In fact, the quest they were on that day involved collecting Magistones from that very cave, so it's likely connected to what happened. Lloyd asks her to show him where Sylvie's wound is, so Clum points at it, and just as Lloyd had expected, a Magistone must have entered Sylvie's body through her wound, and the Magistone's mana is what's transforming her. So far, all of Lloyd's deductions have been correct, so Yui asks Clum to put her faith in him so he can perform the operation to save Sylvie's life. After preparations are complete, Lloyd starts channeling a spell to extract mana directly from Sylvie's body. The process strains him severely as he absorbs wave after wave of corrupted energy. The root of Sylvie's condition traces back to her mana spiraling out of control after exposure to a magic stone. To restore her, Lloyd realizes he must purge nearly all the tainted mana from her system, but he also needs to make sure he doesn't accidentally kill her from mana depletion, so he plans to heal her while simultaneously draining her mana. He begins casting the spells, but Clum doesn't recognize the heal spell Lloyd just used, so she asks him if there's anything different about it. Lloyd explains that he has to do something with all the excess energy he's pulling from Sylvie, so he plans to burn it off by casting a weaker version of the heal spell, since even that basic form drains massive amounts of mana. Since Yui isn't too familiar with white mage terminology, she turns to Clum and asks if what Lloyd's doing is actually something impressive. However, impressive doesn't even begin to describe what Lloyd is doing. He's using a spell he designed on his own. He's casting 2 types of magic alone, which is already impressive, but he also has more willpower than any normal person. As Lloyd continues healing, the magic stone transformation on Sylvie's body begins to regress, and by the time Lloyd is done, she has finally returned to normal. It took a lot out of him to make it happen, so Lloyd is left exhausted after finishing the task. Not long after, Sylvie finally regains consciousness, and Clom is overcome with emotion, crying at the sight of her younger sister awake and well. She thanks both Lloyd and Yui for everything they've done, but once Sylvie is fully recovered, Clom intends to start adventuring alongside her again. Yui is sad that Clom won't be coming back to her party, but she respects Clom's decision to stay with her sister. She walks down the hallway and bids her farewell. As Lloyd prepares to leave, Clom stops him and requests that he look after the party in her place. Lloyd responds that he isn't officially part of the group yet and feels too inexperienced to be of much help. Clom doesn't understand why he doubts himself, but she encourages him to follow his heart instead. That evening, Yui and Lloyd share the news with the rest of the group that Sylvie has been healed, and everyone commends Lloyd for his incredible effort. Still, since Clom made it clear she won't be coming back, the party now has to reconsider what their next steps will be. In the short time he spent with them, Lloyd has grown fond of everyone and can see that they truly care about one another. Unlike the hero party he used to be part of, a bit nervous, he asks if they'd still be willing to have him as their healer. As it turns out, they were all secretly hoping he'd decide to join them, so his offer is a huge relief and a big win for the party. To welcome Lloyd into their group, Yui tells him he can eat as much as he likes tonight since they'll be paying for everything, something no one has done for him since he arrived in the city. Overjoyed, Lloyd dives in and begins scarfing down plate after plate, amazed by how delicious everything tastes. However, the others are confused by his enthusiasm, as the food is fairly typical by the city's standards. Lloyd is stunned that such rich flavors are considered ordinary here, and it makes him start to doubt the quality of the meals he grew up with. The others become curious and ask what kind of food Lloyd used to eat. He explains that his meals consisted of whatever mushrooms, herbs with some meat from animals he hunted in the forest. Unfortunately, his master cooking skills were terrible. Yui then asks Lloyd to tell them more about his master, because even if her cooking wasn't great, anyone capable of teaching Lloyd such powerful magic must be an incredible person. Silica wonders if Lloyd's master is also a white mage. Lloyd admits he never asked her before leaving home, so he isn't certain. However, judging by how often she created explosions, he suspects she's more of a combat-oriented mage. Silica is amazed that Lloyd's master could teach him white magic despite not specializing in it. She then adds that, if given the chance, she'd love to train under Lloyd's master too. However, Lloyd quickly dismisses the idea, insisting Silica is better off never meeting his master. Given the grueling training he endured under Merlin, he wouldn't subject even his greatest foe to that kind of suffering. That doesn't mean he dislikes her, though. While she was harsh in her teachings, she also showed him kindness, proving she truly cared for him. Following their celebration, Yui points out that they still need to devise a plan for their mission. However, first, they should fill Lloyd in on the quest details. Yui shows the quest notice, and Daggers explains that their task is to deal with a group of monsters that have been ravaging nearby farms. The locals haven't been able to fend them off alone. Strangely, the pack consists of several different monster species working together, which is highly unusual. Given how unusual the situation is, anything could happen, but Yui feels that as adventurers, it's their duty to protect those in danger, and Lloyd shares her view. As for their strategy, Yui and Daggers won't be much help in a direct fight against a horde of monsters, so they'll need to depend on Silica's magic to take down the creatures. However, using magic across a wide area takes a significant amount of mana, which makes Silica concerned that she might not be able to wipe out the entire group if the horde is too large. Yui then asks Lloyd if he knows any offensive spells. He replies that he does know a few, but he doubts that a white mage like him can match the power of a combat mage like Silica. Regardless, they still need to figure out a battle plan. Daggers proposes that he and Yui take the lead to attract the monsters' attention. Once the creatures are focused on them, he'll lure them into a single location where Silica can unleash a finishing attack. Cross will be responsible for guarding Silica while she prepares her spell, and Lloyd will handle healing and support magic throughout the fight. Silica is thrilled to have Lloyd's support, knowing how powerful his buffs are. Yet Lloyd remains puzzled by everyone's high opinion of him. Initially, Yui assumed he was just being humble, but now she sees he truly doesn't grasp his own strength. She encourages him, saying he ought to have more faith in his abilities. Lloyd points out that he was expelled from the heroes' party for being too weak, so he couldn't possibly be as strong as they think. The others still can't understand what kind of fools would dismiss Lloyd as powerless. They have complete faith in his skills. Lloyd is glad to hear that. After wrapping up their strategy meeting, everyone heads outside and agrees to regroup the next morning to start the mission. As they all make their way toward the inn, Doggis notices Lloyd walking in the opposite direction and approaches him to ask where he's headed. Lloyd admits that he can't afford a room at the inn. Doggis let his new party members sleep outside, so he offers him a pouch of coins. Lloyd hesitates, not wanting to take money for free, but Doggis tells him it's not a gift, just a temporary favor. He tells Lloyd he can simply repay him once he earns his cut from the mission reward. Lloyd is deeply grateful and promises to do his best to repay the loan. Doggis just urges him to stop wasting time and get to the inn. That night, Lloyd sleeps in a proper bed for the first time in a long while, feeling incredibly thankful to have such kind teammates by his side. The following morning, Lloyd and the group meet outside Yui's house, ready for their mission. When Yui finally steps out to join them, she's surprised to see everyone empty-handed after all. Such missions usually require a lot of gear. The others then explain that Lloyd lent a hand by storing all their supplies with his magic, saving them the trouble of carrying heavy bags. Lloyd offers to store Yui's bag as well, and after he stores her bag, she thanks him, mentioning how much of a hassle it always is to carry luggage while traveling. Lloyd tells them he could teach them how to use storage magic if they're interested, since it's actually not that hard. The others are surprised. They didn't even know regular adventurers like them could learn such a useful skill. Lloyd explains that everyone is born with at least some mana, so learning storage magic should be possible for anyone. It does take a lot of practice to expand how much you can store, but even if their capacity won't match his, it would still be a useful skill to have. Hearing that, they eagerly ask him to teach them, and Lloyd gladly agrees. After a short while, they set off on their journey. As they make their way across the plains, they eventually reach the border of the demon nation. For now, the demons have been keeping quiet, so the area is relatively calm, but there's no telling when they might attempt to invade the continent again. At the same time, deep within the forest, a mysterious figure in a dark cloak conducts a sinister ritual, one that's bound to bring trouble in the near future. Lloyd and the group reach their first checkpoint ahead of schedule, so they decide to make camp by the water. Lloyd retrieves the camping equipment from his storage, and everyone pitches in to set up the tents and prepare a fire pit for the evening. The task takes some time, and once they finish, Yui is exhausted and covered in sweat. She asks Doggis if she can wash up in the river, but Doggis tells her there's still more to do. She needs to collect firewood for cooking dinner. However, Lloyd offers to collect the firewood for Yui instead. Grateful, she thanks him and quickly pulls Silica along to take a bath together in the river. Some time later, while Lloyd is gathering wood in the forest, he finishes up and gets ready to return to camp, until a sudden scream echoes from the river. Yui and Silica had been bathing as planned, but they never expected to encounter a basilisk lurking in the water. To make matters worse, they are both currently unarmed, so if Lloyd doesn't do something soon, then they are going to be eaten. He slides down the cliffside and launches a small fireball to get the monster's attention, and while it is distracted, he tells Yui and Silica to swim over to the shore. He then pulls their weapons out of storage and throws it to them, while simultaneously casting strengthening magic on them. With the battle about to begin, Yui leaps forward and cuts the basilisk's heads in a single slash. Silica quickly shouts for Yui and Lloyd to get clear, warning them that she's about to launch a fireball. They both dive out of the way just as Silica unleashes a powerful blast that completely incinerates the remaining basilisk in one shot. Stunned, Stunned, Silica stares at the aftermath, amazed by the sheer power of her spell, something she's never managed before. What she doesn't know is that Lloyd had secretly cast a buff spell on her earlier, and never mentioned it. Also, at one point, Yui's towel falls off her body right in front of Lloyd, and gets embarrassed, back at camp to take her mind off it. Lloyd decides to start teaching everyone how to use storage magic, and he basically tells them they need to use their hands to open a hole in space so they can store their stuff. It's nowhere near as easy as Lloyd made it sound, but they decide to give it a try anyway. As expected, none of them manage to pull it off, and Lloyd blames himself, thinking he's a poor teacher. However, Dagas reassures him that his instructions were clear, it's just that the others are still new to this, so it'll take time. Right then, Silica has a clever idea. She tries chanting the storage spell aloud. To everyone's surprise, it works. Her storage space opens. That's when the others realize their mistake. They've been attempting to cast the spell silently, just like Lloyd does, forgetting that they're not on his level yet. They all try doing it with incantations this time, and eventually they are all able to get their storage spaces to work, although they still need a bit of practice. Later that night, after everyone has had dinner, Lloyd is sitting by the fire when Yui comes over to talk to him. She tells Lloyd she wants to thank him for joining the party, but Lloyd says there's no need since he was looking for a party to join anyway. Yui still feels a little guilty, knowing she pushed him into it, but Lloyd understands she was just eager to finish the quest. Curious, he asks why she's so invested in this mission, especially since she has no ties to the region under threat. Yui hesitates, then explains that it reminds her of her past. When she was young, her own village was destroyed by monsters. She was the only one who survived the incident, and the trauma has haunted her ever since. That's why she refuses to watch helplessly as another village faces the same fate. Suddenly, Lloyd hears sound coming from the forest and urges Yui to wake the others. They need to leave immediately. Moments later, a horde of huge spiders emerges, advancing through the forest. Initially, the group stays hidden, hoping to avoid a fight. However, Yui accidentally snaps a twig underfoot, drawing the attention of every spider. The group quickly draws their weapons, ready to battle. However, one of the spiders snatches Silica's wand and hurls it into a tree, cutting her off from casting any more attack spells. With the situation quickly escalating, Lloyd steps up and tells the others he has a plan. First, he uses enhancement magic to boost everyone's strength, then sends Yui to keep the spiders busy. Meanwhile, he orders Cross to climb the tree and get Silica's staff. Once Silica has her staff back, Lloyd instructs her and Cross to team up and launch a combined attack to take down the spiders. Though relieved his plan succeeded and everyone is unharmed, he can't help but worry that he may have overstepped by shouting out commands like that. Lloyd apologizes for taking charge, since he isn't the official leader. However, the others don't mind. His experience makes his guidance invaluable. In fact, they found his commands so useful that they'd gladly follow his lead again if they end up in another tight spot. The following morning, the group gathers their camping equipment. Once everything is stored, they're ready to resume their travels. Yet Lloyd remains distracted, troubled by the nagging suspicion that last night's spider attack wasn't just random chance, and wonder what's going on in this forest. The following day, Lloyd decides on his own to stand watch again, just in case something happens. However, the others begin to worry because staying up so late isn't good for his health. They suggest returning to their usual rotating shifts, but Lloyd insists he's fine with things as they are. He's used to staying up late. In his mind, since his skills aren't that impressive, this is the only way he can truly be of help to the team. That's completely untrue, and everyone is well aware of it. But despite all the time they've spent trying to make Lloyd see that his abilities are exceptional, he still doesn't get it. So, Silica tells her to let it go for now, so they can finally get some rest before leaving, though she pleads with Lloyd not to overdo it. The following morning, the group resumes their travels, and Yui grows increasingly worried about Lloyd's lack of self-confidence, noticing him quietly casting a spell in the distance. She approaches to inquire about it. Lloyd tells her he's merely using a basic search spell to check for nearby monsters, but there's nothing basic about it. Search magic is incredibly uncommon, so much so that Yui has never encountered anyone who could wield it before. To Lloyd, though, it feels completely normal. He mentions that his search range isn't even that wide, but he believes it's best to keep using the search magic regularly throughout the trip to ensure their safety. Yui agrees it would make things much safer, but she's concerned that having Lloyd use such an advanced spell so often might put too much strain on him. She offers to help him with anything he might need, but Lloyd replies that he's fine on his own and doesn't need any assistance. That night, as Lloyd stays up to keep watch once again, Yui and Silica begin to wonder inside the tent if maybe he doesn't fully trust them. Yui knows that Lloyd is highly skilled, but up to this point, he hasn't leaned on any of his teammates, despite the fact that they're supposed to work together as companions. Silica isn't too worried after all. It's normal for teammates to take time to adjust to each other. She points out that when their group first formed, even she and Yui barely talked, but eventually, they grew close. Lloyd's situation is a bit different though. For some reason, he's convinced he's weak, pushing himself too hard to prove his worth, even when nobody expects him to. There's likely a reason behind the way Lloyd behaves, and she's confident that, given enough time, he'll eventually open up to them. Meanwhile, outside the tent, Lloyd is still on night watch when Daggers approaches him with a request. He asks Lloyd to lend him a hand with something. Lloyd is more than willing to help, but he hesitates, saying he doesn't feel right leaving his post unattended. Cross then steps in and offers to take over the watch while Lloyd is away. With that, Lloyd agrees to go with Daggers. They walk a bit deeper into the forest, where Daggers begins setting up an intricate clapper system between the trees. Curious, Lloyd asks what it's for, and Daggers explains that the clappers will act as an alarm, alerting them if any monsters get close, so Lloyd won't have to stay up all night on guard duty anymore. Lloyd starts to object, saying he can't use his search magic if he's asleep. In response, Daggers questions whether Lloyd really has that little faith in him. Lloyd quickly denies it. He's constantly insisting on scouting by himself and won't let anyone else take over night watch or lend him a hand. Lloyd insists to Daggers that he truly does trust the party. However, he explains that his master spent years drilling into him that he had to be completely independently, and the first party he joined after arriving in the capital labeled him as useless. Because of that, he felt he had to work extra hard to prove his worth. Daggers, on the other hand, doesn't see Lloyd as a burden whatsoever, and even if he were slowing them down a bit, it wouldn't bother him in the slightest. The entire point of forming the team was so they could support one another, but it had never even crossed Lloyd's mind to lean on others for help, so hearing this is a huge eye-opener for him. Daggers can't help but wonder what kind of harsh treatment Lloyd must have gone through to make him think this way. Still, he tells him they should just focus on getting some rest for now. The two return to camp, where Cross takes watch, while Lloyd and Daggers rest in the tent. Though Lloyd isn't accustomed to relying on others, the thought of having real companions feels comforting, and he decides to embrace it. The next morning, Lloyd approaches Yui and asks if she can help him gather water. For a moment, Yui just stares in shock. This is the very first time he's ever asked her for assistance. Yui is delighted that Lloyd is finally trusting her enough to ask for help, so she eagerly agrees. Meanwhile, in a distant castle, a man named Michael reviews a report confirming that all the magic stones have been positioned as he instructed. Satisfied, he smiles. His plan is progressing perfectly. With the monster attacks he orchestrated, nearly every adventurer in the capital has been sent away on missions, leaving the city vulnerable. Now only low-ranking adventurers and the heroes' party remain in the capital. Michaels would have preferred if the heroes' group had left as well, but he isn't worried. He's certain his forces can crush them without much trouble. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, Lloyd and his party press onward. However, Yui grows uneasy, sensing something ominous about this place. It's unusually silent in this area, and the group finds it odd that they haven't run into a single monster since entering this part of the forest. Yui asks Lloyd if he's responsible for the monster's strange absence, but he explains that the only magic he's been using is search magic, which doesn't drive monsters away. That means something else must be frightening the monsters off. Lloyd expands the range of his search magic to try and identify the cause. After scanning, he finally detects something. He informs the group that there's a horde of monsters about 10 kilometers ahead, which according to the map is right in the direction of the farm they were headed toward. Before they discuss it further, Yui asks Lloyd if he really scanned everything within a 10-kilometer radius. Lloyd confirms it, and he doesn't think it's a big deal, but the others are stunned. They explain that even the most gifted mages can't scan any anywhere near that far. Lloyd, surprised to learn that 10 kilometers is considered remarkable, instinctively tries to brush off the accomplishment as if it were nothing. Lloyd quickly downplays his ability, explaining that 10 kilometers is his absolute limit and drains his mana heavily, so he can't use it frequently. But the others aren't fooled, it's still an incredible feat. Yui grits her teeth in frustration at how oblivious he is to his own strength. Unfortunately, now isn't the time to lecture him. They still have a mission to focus on. They finally reach the farm, but despite being warned about the number of monsters, seeing it firsthand is still frightening. Aside from the sheer number of high wolves, Lloyd recalls the report mentioning that the horde included various types of monsters. He begins to question where the rest of them went. The others share his concern, knowing for sure that the forest houses creatures far stronger than the wolves present, meaning there's no way the wolves would have been the ones to dominate if a battle had occurred. Lloyd asks Yui if she knows where the farm's owner is, but she says she's not exactly sure. The request mentioned that he was injured and is currently staying with his son in the city. At that moment, Cross spots something unusual on the farm and tells the others to check it out. However, they aren't able to see anything clearly since their eyesight isn't as sharp as his. Lloyd also struggles to see what's down there, so he uses enhancement magic on his eyes. With his vision now improved, he spots a creepy-looking magic stone in the center of the farm. He then casts the same vision boost on the others, and once they all get a good look, they agree the magic stone gives off a bad vibe. However, based on Lloyd's observation, he suspects it could be some kind of beast folk magic. His master once told him that beast folk magic stones have the power to control monsters. That means someone is likely using this one to draw them in. To confirm his suspicions, Lloyd activates his search magic once more. Just as he feared, he detects another enormous horde of monsters coming their way. He can't help but question the motive. If someone really wanted to wipe out their party, there were far simpler methods than going through all this effort to attract monsters. Lloyd is still lost in thought, trying to make sense of the situation, but Cross snaps him out of it by reminding him that another horde of monsters is on the way, so they need to fall back immediately. Yui objects, saying they can't retreat. If they do, the farm will be wiped out. Cross argues that there's no way the group can take on over 1,000 monsters by themselves, but Degas points out that retreating might not be an option anymore. Even if they manage to escape, there's a good chance they'll lead the monsters right to the town. They're all uncertain about the best course of action, but Lloyd insists they should fight. He has a plan. First, he explains that they need to destroy the magic stone and asks Cross if he can hit it from their current position. Cross is confident in his accuracy, but given the distance, he doubts his shot will have enough force to shatter the stone in one attempt. Lloyd reassures him, saying that if power is the problem, his enhancement magic can make up the difference. Cross lines up his shot, and right before he fires, Lloyd simultaneously casts 3 different enhancements on Cross, his bow, and the arrow, maximizing the power behind the attack. The arrow streaks across the distance and obliterates the magic stone in a single hit. Cross is amazed that he actually made the shot, so he asks Lloyd how he pulled it off. Lloyd casually explains that he enhanced all 3 objects at once to amplify the force of the shot. Cross is shocked that Lloyd can enhance 3 separate targets at the same time, but Lloyd, as clueless as usual, brushes it off like it's nothing special and hardly worth mentioning. Now that the magic stone is gone, the monsters begin turning on each other, no longer under the influence of mind control. Even if they don't wipe themselves out entirely, Lloyd figures this will at least thin their numbers significantly. As for the second horde, Lloyd had been hoping they'd retreat after the crystal's destruction, but that's not the case. With the horde still charging in, everyone quickly gets into position, but as the massive wave of monsters approaches, the group starts to feel the pressure, their nerves fraying at the overwhelming sight. Lloyd urges the group to hold their attack until the monsters are within close range. Just as the creatures are about to reach Silica, he signals her to strike, and she unleashes her firestorm spell. To her shock, the flames incinerate the monsters instantly, reducing them to ash far more effectively than she ever expected. The others immediately realize something's off. Silica's magic shouldn't be this powerful. When they question Lloyd, he casually explains that he enhanced her mana efficiency while reducing the spell's cost, amplifying its destructive potential without draining her energy. With the first step done, Lloyd rushes over to Cross to get ready for the next stage. He opens a telepathic link and, using his search magic, shares the locations of all the flying monsters so Cross can snipe them through the dense smoke. One by one, the flying threats are eliminated, and with that taken care of, it's time to move on to the final part of the plan. Lloyd rushes to Silica and checks if she's finished off the monsters. She confirms she's wiped them all out, but warns that she's nearly drained of mana, leaving her unable to contribute much more. Lloyd reassures her, telling her not to worry, and asks her to take his hand. Though she's unsure of what he's planning, Silica follows his lead, and the moment their hands meet, Lloyd starts transferring his mana to her. Silica then channels that mana to cast a rain spell over the forest to extinguish the flames. Once the fires are out, she collapses, having completely drained her magic. Lloyd is worn out too, but while Yui and the others praise him for practically carrying the entire plan, all he can think about is how weak he must be to feel this exhausted after taking down 1,000 monsters. After Yui and Dagaz finish wiping out the remaining monsters and return to check on the others, Lloyd can't shake the suspicion that this was just a diversion and that the true target is the town of Ishtar. Yui asks what he means, so he explains by telling them that the higher-ups sending high-ranking adventurers out on quests would only get them away from Ishtar, and on top of that, he feels the monsters were deliberately sent their way to slow them down. But none of this makes sense to Cross. Ishtar already has its own hero and a ton of knights. He doesn't think the city would fall that easily since it has all that protection. Lloyd thinks about it for a second and starts to see Cross's point. However, the more Dagaz thinks about it, the more Lloyd's assumption makes sense. The whole group reflects on it and starts to believe that Ishtar must have already collapsed. Still, to be sure, Yui suggests they go back right away to check, and everyone agrees. Lloyd summons his staff and first gives everyone a magic speed boost. Then, he starts to run with superhuman speed. The others see how fast he's moving and ask him to wait up. But at the moment they start to chase after him, they discover that they can now also run with this same superhuman speed. As they run side by side, Yui asks Lloyd how this is possible. He explains that a few seconds ago, he used his magic to temporarily enhance everyone's speed, which is why they're able to run this fast. Elsewhere, Michel is just about to have his favorite glass of wine until he gets interrupted by the great General Grist. He came here to inform Michel that their vanguard is currently descending on Ishtar, which means that everything is going according to plan so far, and they say it's all thanks to the Beastfolk girl. If not for her, there's no way things would have gone this far. They plan on making her come to serve them in the future as well. Michel believes they're only going to keep benefiting if they continue using her as they are right now. The General Grist isn't sure what he means by that, but since people around here refer to him as the Demon Lord's right-hand man, he trusts he'll be able to handle everything. That said, the General turns his back and walks away. Meanwhile, the girl remains in her cell, having a depressed look on her face. Michel goes down there once more to borrow her power. He's been using her magic to create those beast magic stones. At the same time, Lloyd and the others have been able to cover a long distance thanks to the speed boost they got. They choose a cool spot to stop and rest, and with the way things are going, they're confident they'll arrive back at Ishtar in no time. Lloyd whips up some more potions for everyone to help maintain their mana level, and after they're done drinking, Silica shows her concern by asking Lloyd whether using his enhancement magic on them so often is taking a toll on him. Silica heard that it requires a lot of mana to maintain enhancement magic. Lloyd replies, saying that would be true for someone who doesn't use it often, but once you get the hang of it, you can cut down the mana consumption by quite a bit. Silica is shocked to see that Lloyd is confident enough to say he's gotten to that level. He explains that he's used it a ton of times, so his body was kind of forced to adapt. While he was a kid, his master would dump him in the woods far from civilization and make him find his way back home all by himself as a form of training. He's a white mage, so fighting monsters wasn't really his strong suit, so the best he could do was run most of the time. He even had to cast all kinds of enhancement magic just to survive. It was a really traumatizing experience for him. Yui and Silica hear that sad story and can see Lloyd had really been through a lot as a kid, but Lloyd doesn't think it was a big deal. He sees it as a common training exercise. He feels he was just really inexperienced at that time. That kind of training is what made him the man he is today. His master was always scolding him during training, but now that he thinks about it, it might actually have been worth it. However, Yui disagrees, saying the training he underwent as a kid was far far from normal and even quite inhumane. Silica agrees, saying his training regimen was not normal at all. When Lloyd hears this, he starts to think they meant his training wasn't even up to standard. He's suddenly filled with a sense of emptiness, believing he didn't train hard enough during his childhood. Silica and Yui try to explain that he's misunderstood, but he's already deep in thought, vowing to train even harder and do his best to support them. They see he's gotten the wrong idea, but don't even bother telling him about it because they feel it's pointless. In the next few moments, they decide to continue their journey, but before leaving, Lloyd raises his staff and uses his search magic to scan for nearby enemies. There doesn't seem to be anyone around, so they continue their journey without any obstructions. Along the way, they acknowledge how incredible the magic enhancement speed boost is. They're currently running several times faster than normal, and they haven't even broken a sweat. But just then, Lloyd stops abruptly, causing them all to trip and fall down to the ground. They ask Lloyd why he stopped so suddenly, so he tells them that it's because he started sensing something with his search magic. He's not really sure what it is, but let's just say he has a bad feeling about it. That bad feeling leads him to making a sudden decision. He tells the rest of them to head on to Ishtar. He'll trail behind them as soon as he checks the area out and confirms that nothing is following them. Yui says there's no way they're going without him. She wants them all to go as one and check out the area, but Lloyd still insists on going alone. Yui reminds Lloyd that he's not the best when it comes to fighting monsters, and since he doesn't know for sure what is out there, it would only make sense for the rest of his party members to come along with him. Lloyd realizes there's no way he's going to change Yui's mind, so he just agrees to let them come with him. Elsewhere, 4 creepy guys in black robes are holding hands around a glowing green orb. It looks like they're about to perform some sort of ritual. Meanwhile, Lloyd traces the disturbance he sensed to an abandoned old house in the forest. Now that they've gotten here, Lloyd is fairly certain that there are some demons up inside. He can sense it clearly now that they're closer. Hearing this, Yui immediately asks if they're the ones from the Megocracy. The Megocracy is widely known as the Nation of Demons. They've been inactive a while now, but the adventurers still have to be on their toes in case they ever try to take over the continent again. Lloyd strokes his chin while he recalls that demons are strictly prohibited from entering the continent's 3 major nations. Cross and the others aren't fazed by that information because it's basically common knowledge. Turns out Lloyd doesn't have any memories of the demon invasion from when he was kid, mostly because by the time his master took him in, the war was already over. That aside, Lloyd points out the fact that if demons have already invaded, then the situation would already be really bad. Hearing this, Cross suggests they report all this to the knights when they get back to Ishtar. But before then, Lloyd tells him that he would like to gather a little more information before they report it. He knows doing that is quite dangerous, but he can't just shake the fact that he's sensing the same mana from that Magistone near the demons. Hearing that, Daggers realizes it means the demons may be connected to whoever had that horde of monsters attack on the farm. On top of that, if the demons are planning on attacking Ishtar, Lloyd figures it just might be worth the risk. That said, they all agree to check out the demon-filled hut. They get closer and look inside the house, but to their surprise, there's no one there. Lloyd uses his search magic to confirm, and after a few seconds, he can sense their presence underground. Daggers assumes there has to be an entrance around there somewhere, so he suggests they start looking for it. However, Lloyd tells them there's no need to look for the entrance since Silica can use earth magic. Lloyd casts enhancement magic on everyone, and Silica uses her sandpit technique to smash through the floor, where we see those same 4 creepy guys conducting their ritual. Yui springs forward and puts her sword to their throats, asking who they are and what they're doing here. One of them tries to be slick and uses his magic to throw some rocks at Yui, but she easily blocks them. Right after, Cross shoots arrows at him that are right on target. Silica uses her sandpit technique again, causing the floor to collapse. The hooded demos try to flee, but only one manages to escape. The others get taken down by Lloyd and his team, but there's no time to celebrate. One of them is still on the loose. The demon who escaped rushes into the girl's cell and casts a spell that wraps her in a cocoon and lifts her into the air. Yui and the others arrive moments later and begin chasing after him. As Yui runs up the stairs, Lloyd tells her to take the round path to cut him off. Watching the demon flee with the girl in the cocoon, Lloyd senses a powerful magic coming from within it. They all start to chase the demon, and in the next few moments, they appear to have him surrounded. wanted. Lloyd simply asks him to surrender peacefully. He has some questions he would like to ask him, but the demon isn't going down without a fight. As a last-ditch effort, he uses his magic to launch a lightning attack on them. But Lloyd reacts in time and puts up a barrier to protect everyone. The spell backfires, and the demon ends up getting hit by his own lightning, knocking him out. They bring the cocoon down and unwrap it. Lloyd takes a single look at Girl and can tell she's one of the beast folk. About 30 minutes later, they take her inside and lay her in bed. It turns out they weren't able to get any information out of the demons, meaning that this girl is the only one who has the details of what exactly happened. But considering the dire medical state she's in, they doubt she'll be able to do any talking, so Lloyd uses his healing magic on her. The others observe the healing process and are amazed at how incredible Lloyd's healing magic is as well. He even managed to cure Sylvie's magic stone transformation, which definitely isn't an easy feat. Lloyd mentions that he made a few improvements to the spell. Yui is shocked, since most adventurers aren't capable of doing that. Silica adds that being able to tweak magic is pretty impressive, but Lloyd is just as surprised as they are. His master used to force him to improve her spells all the time. Shortly after that, the girl wakes up. Yui gets a little overexcited and starts to ask her what her name is. Once she calms down, she tells Yui that her name is Claire. Yui asks her why she was being held captive by the demons, but it's obvious that Claire is so nervous that she doesn't even give a response. Lloyd speaks up and tells her that they're adventurers. He tells Claire how they received a quest to protect a farm from a horde of monsters, but along the way, he sensed beast folk mana. Lloyd heard rumors of some people having the ability to use their magic to control monsters. As he moves closer, he asks if she has that ability. Claire quietly confirms that she does. Elsewhere, some knights are seen doing a routine patrol through the woods. That's when they stumble upon a giant magic stone and decide to touch it. The moment one of them touches it, they get surrounded by several red-eyed wolves. They then run for their lives while being chased by the wolves. Back in the house, Lloyd learns that the demons had Claire chained up in that cell and were forcing her to use her power of controlling monsters. Hearing this, things make a lot more sense now. The demons captured Claire in order to use the monsters in their army. Ishtar is currently being attacked by the Megocracy, meaning if they get control over the city, it'll be much easier to invade the continent. There's now a big chance that Ishtar is already destroyed, so Lloyd suggests they get back there as fast as possible. He grants Claire the magic enhancement speed boost, which allows them all to move at the same pace. On reaching the next landmark, they stop to rest and drink water. That's when Lloyd uses his searching magic once more, but this time he senses a horde of monsters headed towards Ishtar. But that's not all. There's a large army following behind them. Everyone looks to Lloyd, asking him what they should do now. He thinks about it for a moment and tells Claire he's going to need to borrow her power, and as for the others, he tells them to go and warn the city and prepare for battle. Before they leave, Lloyd hits them with another round of enhancement magic, which restores them to full health and stamina, after which the two teams set off in opposite directions, hoping their efforts will be enough to save Ishtar. Back at Ishtar, Alan angrily swipes several party application documents off his desk. He's frustrated because he thinks every applicant is too weak to join his party. He's in search of a support mage, but in his eyes, every last one of the applicants are even worse than Lloyd when he was with them. The girls tell Alan that this is the best selection of support mages in the area, but Alan refuses to accept anyone that can't even use storage magic. Lena says she actually considered Lloyd to be rather exceptional, but Alan doesn't feel that way about Lloyd in the slightest. He considers him nothing but a piece of trash. Alan considers whether it would be wise for their party to continue without a support mage, but that's when someone knocks on the door. A knight opens it to inform Alan that a horde of monsters is advancing on Ishtar. The troops patrolling the forest reported that they saw over 10,000 monsters. Alan gasps in shock. The knights are currently working on establishing defensive lines and have come all this way to ask Alan and his party for help defeating the monsters. Alan agrees to help them without hesitation. This gives the knight a feeling of reassurance after he hears this. The knight then walks out to inform his comrades of the good news. The other party members question Alan on whether agreeing to help them so quickly was a good idea. Alan smirks while explaining to them that this was a direct request from the king, so there was literally no way he could turn that down. Other than that, he figures it would be a good way for him to show off just how strong he is. Lena hears that and doesn't like the sound of it one bit. In the forest near Ishtar, Lloyd and Claire watch from a cliff as countless monsters move below. Lloyd had already expected a large number, and this group is just as big as the one heading toward Ishtar. He believes the city won't stand a chance if a horde this size joins the main attackers. Maybe splitting up the party was the right choice after all. Lloyd says they need to wipe out this group somehow, but Claire feels sorry for the monsters, knowing they're being controlled by the demonic power she helped create. She asks Lloyd whether it would be possible to stop the monsters without hurting them. It's obvious to Lloyd that Claire really cares about these monsters, so he tells her that he'll think of a way to free the horde while causing as little harm as possible. He feels it's best to resolve matters without killing anyway. Lloyd suggests Claire use her magic to peacefully send the monsters back to their homes, but she's not sure if she'll be able to pull that off, especially since there are so many of them. Lloyd has the idea of supplementing her mana and augmenting her spell to make it stronger. He asks her whether that would be enough to pull off, and Claire replies, saying she's willing to give it a shot. She steps forward and begins using her spell, causing her to emit a bright green aura, but then her spell gets blocked, making her realize that there has to be something in the forest causing interference. Meanwhile, at the local adventurers guild, Alan and his party members are there, and still in search of a worthy support mage for their squad. Turns out all the high-ranked adventurers are currently unavailable, so everyone here is either in B rank or below. Alan doesn't think any of them are worthy of joining his party, so he just begins to insult them, calling them all worthless pieces of trash. The adventurers quickly get pissed off and are about to fight back, but that's when the guild master steps in and tells them to cut it out. Now that things have calmed down, Alan decides to give the adventurers a rundown of his plan when facing the horde of monsters. First, the mages are to unleash their most powerful spells on the monsters. He expects those spells to take out at least 10 monsters each. Then, he and the other fighters will go head-to-head with the monsters and buy time for the support mages to recover their mana, and once they do, they'll just fire another round of spells. Alan plans on them repeating that sequence until the horde of monsters has been totally defeated. However, the mages among the adventurers don't feel so confident about that plan because they aren't capable of using magic that powerful. Maya also speaks up and says that she doesn't feel confident about that plan either because the power of her spells has dropped off recently, so she doubts if she'll be able to draw that kind of magic. Alan gasps in shock as he hears this, and he asks her why she would keep quiet about something like this for so long. But Maya says it's not just her. The other members in the team like Lulu, Sheena, and Lena also have noticed a significant drop in strength ever since Lloyd left the party. Hearing this makes Alan furious because he feels his teammates have just been deceiving him all along. But Lena steps in, telling Alan it's his fault for not noticing it up until now. Moreover, Lena noticed that Alan has grown more complacent as a hero and hasn't done any training in a while. The other adventurers are shocked to hear that Alan hasn't been training all this while. His emotions get the best of him, so he throws a punch at Lena, but she effortlessly catches it with her palm. He's surprised how Lena got strong enough to stop one of his punches. Embarrassed, he runs out of the building while telling them not to blame him for whatever happens next. All the party members except Lena chase after Alan. The adventurers are currently in a state of shock. This is their first time encountering Alan in real life, and he's nothing like the rumors make him out to be. Left with no other option, they believe all they can do is run away from the monster horde that's approaching. But Lena speaks up and urges them all to keep their cool. She informs them that she'll be leaving Alan's party. She feels she has a better shot at winning if she fights alongside them. The adventurers are already aware of how powerful she is, so they have no objections. But before they head to the battlefield, Lena asks if they've seen a boy named Lloyd today. Meanwhile, deep in the forest, Lloyd and Claire are hiding in the bushes as they discover a giant magistone that's being guarded by some wolf monsters. Claire's theory is that the magistone is imbued with an evil power that's interfering with her spell. She also assumes that there are multiple magistones just like this one, and unless they're able to deal with all of them, she won't be able to control the monsters with her spell. Lloyd hears that and says what they need to do now is discover the locations of the other magistones. Claire would easily be able to sense them if they were close, but she's unable to do so over large distances like this. To solve that problem, Lloyd summons his magic staff and uses it to expand Claire's senses. That way, she'll be able to track the Magistones even over large distances. He also uses some concealment magic on them both, so they'll be able to get close to the Magistones without raising an alarm. However, the spell breaks with heavy impact, so he warns Claire to be careful. Just as planned, they manage to move past the wolves undetected and disable the Magistone. After it's disabled, the wolves are no longer being controlled, so they just walk away from each other. Meanwhile, the army of Ishtar sets formation at the castle gates, awaiting the monster horde's attacks. However, the guild master knows that even with this large army, their lives all depend on none other than Lloyd. Early, at the Adventurers Guild, Lena explains to the other adventurers that Lloyd was the only reason Alan's hero party was so successful, even though he was a mere white mage. Hearing that, the adventurers wonder why they kicked Lloyd out of their party if he was really the reason behind their success. Lena explains that all the others, including herself, grew overconfident in their strength without realizing that it was all thanks to Lloyd's support magic. Lena believes they might still be able to turn things around with Lloyd's help, so she asks the adventurers whether any of them have an idea where he is. The guild master happens to keep tabs on every adventurer that's registered with the guild. His reports say that Lloyd is currently out on a monster slaying quest with an S-rank party, but the location is so far away that the trip alone would take them a few days to arrive. However, Lena believes that Lloyd would be able to shorten their travel time with the help of his support magic, but she realizes her plan won't work if the adventurers don't put all their faith in Lloyd, so she asks them whether they're willing to. Later that day, the adventurers set up their formation and wait for the incoming monsters. The horde charges straight toward them, but the adventurers hold their ground, fighting back with the resources they have. The guild master watches the battle unfold and thinks that if they can hold out until Lloyd and the other S-rankers return, they might just have a chance to survive. Later that night in the forest, the other half of Lloyd's party have just taken a break to rest after running for hours towards Ishtar. They're relieved because they know it won't take long before they arrive. Things have been going well for them so far, all thanks to Lloyd's support magic. They assume Lloyd is doing everything in his power to save Ishtar right now, so they can't afford to get lazy now. That said, they decide to continue their journey. Meanwhile, Lloyd and Claire have just deactivated the last Magistone without being detected by the wolves, but things take a foul turn as the High Wolves and Blood Panthers start to fight each other. From what Claire can see, they've chosen to fight rather than return back into the forest. In the middle of the fight, they end up knocking over the Magistone, which hits Claire, allowing her concealment magic to wear off. The wolves instantly spot Claire and turn their attention towards her. So, to save Claire, Lloyd disables his concealment magic and shoots a flare in the sky, drawing the wolves' attention towards him. Back in the city, things aren't looking so good for the adventurers because their front line has just been breached by a wave of monsters, and to make matters worse, even more monsters are seen to be approaching with horrific speed. But just before they collide with the adventurers, the monsters get hit with a wave of fire. The guild master looks on and is delighted to see that the S-ranked adventurers have finally arrived. Meanwhile, Lloyd is still holding his ground against the wolves. He's easily able to dodge their attacks now that he's used some physical enhancement magic, but he knows it's only a matter of time before his body gives out. Claire observes Lloyd's fighting style and notices that he's only dodging and not attacking at all. She realizes he's doing that because she previously told him that she didn't want to hurt the monsters, and he's doing that for her sake. Lloyd has just about reached his limit and is about to get eaten by the wolves, but that's when he starts to hear Claire's beautiful singing. So the wolves instantly stop attacking Lloyd and focus on her instead. Then, after her song is done, the wolves just casually walk away like nothing happened. Lloyd rushes over to her for an explanation of what just happened, so Claire explains that all she did was use her singing to persuade the wolves to return to the forest. She lets Lloyd know that her power doesn't directly let her control monsters, it actually just lets her convey her thoughts to them. Back at Ishtar, even with the S-ranked adventurers, their team is quickly getting getting overpowered by the monsters. Things get so bad that all the adventurers have already accepted defeat. There's simply nothing more they can do. As dawn breaks, the guild master watches from above and has no choice but to accept the same fate. But just then, Claire's beautiful singing is heard again. Lloyd uses his support magic to help project her voice over that long distance, and after a few moments, the monsters no longer lead an attack. They just turn their backs and walk away. The adventurers look towards the cliff top and see that this is all Lloyd and Claire's doing. Lloyd is really impressed with how Claire is able to communicate with monsters. He finds it really fascinating. But Claire tells Lloyd that she's the one to be thanking him, because there's no way she would have been able to project her power across that long distance on her own. Lloyd admits he may have been of help, but there's no doubt that it was her power that saved both the monsters and the adventurers. Still, Lloyd knows they can't start celebrating just yet because there's still a life-threatening battle ahead of them, as he spots a horde of rock golems approaching the city. Meanwhile, Michel sits in his office, happily sipping wine, convinced that Ishtar has already been crushed by 30,000 monsters. But suddenly, one of his servants enters to give a report about the situation at the front lines. Hearing this, Michel smirks, assuming the monsters must have already captured Ishtar. But to his surprise, the servant says the monsters' advance was actually stopped, and they have now begun retreating. Shocked, Michel immediately stands up, unable to believe what he just heard. At the same time, Lloyd and Claire are still on the battlefield, and they notice that some of the golems haven't retreated like the others because they didn't hear Claire's song. Seeing this, Lloyd raises his staff and strengthens both of their physical abilities, giving them the speed to run past the golems for a short while. But then, one of them lands an attack that's far stronger than Lloyd expected. Luckily, he dodges it in time, but this makes him realize that the golems themselves have been magically enhanced. The two of them keep pushing forward, but their biggest problem now is the giant pit ahead of them. Just before reaching it, Lloyd smoothly grabs Claire by the waist and leaps across the pit with her. Everyone else watching is left speechless. So this is the true Lloyd everyone has been talking about. After landing safely, Yui's party members are relieved and overjoyed to see that both he and Claire made it back in one piece. They quickly acknowledge that it was thanks to Claire's song that the monsters retreated, and with the monsters gone, they feel like victory is finally within reach. However, Lloyd tells them not to celebrate yet, since they still need to deal with the golems, who are still a serious threat. But right then, Lloyd suddenly collapses from fatigue. The others rush to him and quickly realize he's been pushing himself too hard, exhausting his body by constantly casting support magic. Still, Lloyd forces himself back up, insisting that he's fine, and that everyone should keep their focus on the battles still ahead. The guild master and several knights then approach, and Lloyd decides to place Claire in their care until everything is settled. The guild master nods in agreement, promising to have the knights protect her. Lloyd then turns to Claire and thanks her deeply for everything she's done, saying that without her, they never would have made it this far. But Claire tells him not to be so modest, because he also saved her when she needed it most, and leaves. The guild master looks at Lloyd and admits he's glad Lloyd arrived in time, because right now, he is Ishtar's last hope. Hearing that, Lloyd is confused, until Lena joins the conversation and explains that he's the last hope because Alan never joined the battle at all. Lloyd is shocked and immediately asks why. Lena then explains that Alan abandoned his duties and ran off after having a clash with some adventurers at the guild. Hearing this, Lloyd gets furious, since Alan always boasted about being a hero, yet when the city needed him most, he turned his back and left, putting countless citizens' lives in danger. Lena calls Alan nothing but a fraud, but right after saying that, she clutches her arm in pain as blood pours from the stab wound she received earlier. Lloyd notices immediately and tells her to stay still. He then uses his support magic to heal the wound instantly. The guild master watches and is truly impressed. However, the constant use of support magic begins to take its toll on Lloyd, and he faints once again. This time, Lena manages to catch him before he falls. When Lloyd manages to stand back up, Lena speaks to him honestly. She admits that she never realized he was the one who had been holding their team together all along. He was the backbone of their group, but she failed to see it back then, and she didn't even protest when he was kicked out, so she apologizes deeply. But Lloyd shakes his head and tells her it's not her fault, because he was removed simply for lacking strength. Just then, a group of golems begins marching toward them. The knights notice there aren't many golems left, so they decide this is the perfect chance to attack. They immediately charge in, but Lloyd shouts out, warning them not to engage because these aren't ordinary golems. The knights ignore the warning and strike, but their blades don't even scratch the golem. Instead, their weapons break on impact, and the golem counters with a crushing blow that knocks a knight down. Seeing that, the mages step in and fire long-range spells, but their magic has no effect either. The party realizes that their formation is beginning to crumble, and they panic, wondering what their next move should be. Lloyd steps forward and declares that he will cast enhancement magic on everyone present. His allies are stunned to hear this. There are far too many people on the battlefield, and they fear Lloyd's body won't be able to handle casting support spells on such a massive scale. But Lloyd insists he'll be fine, though he admits he can only strengthen one group at a time. Even so, Cross is impressed, because most people can't even enhance a single group, let alone multiple ones. Lloyd then begins casting enhancements, covering every group on the battlefield. But once he's finished, he collapses again from the overwhelming strain on his body. Even so, he quickly informs his party members about the buffs he has given. The frontline fighters have received physical enhancements, the magic unit has been boosted in spell power, and his party members have received their own reinforcements as well. However, Lloyd warns that the effects won't last long, so they need to finish the fight quickly. As the golems draw closer, Yui climbs up into the search tower and shouts out to everyone below and announcing that Lloyd has cast incredible enhancement magic on the entire force, and with these buffs, they now stand a real chance of overcoming even an outnumbered battle. But despite her words, the knights still don't feel fully confident, hesitation written all over their faces. One of the knights lowers his guard and is about to be crushed by a golem strike, but Lena rushes in at the last second and uses her shield to block the attack. Right after, Yui leaps down and slices the golem clean in half with her sword. Seeing this, Lena shouts to everyone that this is the power of Lloyd's enhancement magic, and if they all fight together, they can definitely bring the golems down. The others finally realize it too, noticing that their bodies feel lighter, faster, and stronger than before. Yui reminds them that this boost is all thanks to Lloyd, and if they want his efforts to mean something, they need to win this fight. Fired up by her words, everyone roars in agreement. Meanwhile, Lloyd gives quick orders. He tells Cross to move to the magic unit and instructs Dagas to protect Silica on the front lines. After sending them off, Lloyd nearly collapses again, but a knight manages to catch him before he falls. The guild master urges him to take a moment to breathe and recover. On the battlefield, everyone unleashes their strongest attacks against the golems. Thanks to Lloyd's enhancements, those attacks are finally landing heavy, devastating blows. Watching from above, Lloyd sees this and urges them to keep pushing, because it looks like they truly have a chance at victory now. Back on the ground, almost all the golems are defeated, leaving only one still standing. Yui smirks, thinking this last one will be easy. A knight steps in to deliver the final blow, but to his shock, his blade shatters on impact. The golem counters immediately, smashing him into the ground. From a distance, Lloyd realizes what this means. His enhancement magic has worn off. As expected, fear spreads quickly. The soldiers panic, scattering in different directions, leaving only Lloyd's party members to face the final golem. Yui is about to be struck directly, but Dagas steps in at the last second to shield her, summoning the little mana he has left. Lloyd forces himself to cast one more round of enhancement magic, but with his energy nearly gone, he can only strengthen their weapons instead of their bodies. Yui looks down at her sword and sees the magical glow from Lloyd's spell. She knows she can't waste this chance. With determination, she calls on Lena and Dagas for support. The two boost her up, and Yui leaps off their backs, channeling everything into one final strike. Her sword slices through with overwhelming force, destroying the last golem in a single blow. With the enemy finally defeated, the soldiers erupt into cheers, celebrating their success in protecting Ishtar. From his spot on the tower, Lloyd lets out a long breath of relief, With the battle finally over, he allows himself to faint at last, this time in peace. Meanwhile, Will watches from a distance on a cliffside and notices that Lloyd seems to be thriving here, even more than when he was still part of the hero team. Later that same day, Grist storms into Michelle's office to deliver the bad news about their failed operation, but when he enters, he's stunned to see that Michelle isn't there. At that moment, Grist realizes he's been scammed. Furious, he wrecks Michelle's office in a fit of rage, and once he's finished, he swears that he will kill anyone who dares interfere with his plans. That same day, Lloyd wakes up inside a cozy-looking inn. Yui enters happily, relieved to see that he's finally awake, since he had been sleeping the entire day. Lloyd apologizes, blaming it on the fact that he isn't powerful enough. Yui tells him that he always talks down on himself, so in order to boost his confidence, she takes him outside to meet the crowd of Ishtar citizens who have been waiting for him to wake up. As soon as they see him, they cheer loudly and praise Lloyd, calling him Ishtar's hero. Yui smirks, thinking this will surely give him the confidence boost he needs, but instead, Lloyd shuts the door immediately, saying that it's way too many people. Yui quickly opens the door again and urges him to at least greet his fans, but before she realizes it, Lloyd dives straight out of the window and runs off down the alley to escape. Meanwhile, over at Merlin's place, Will stops by to see her. Just as he's about to open the door, a massive explosion erupts. Merlin steps out, and Will jokes that blowing things up isn't exactly the best way to greet a guest. Inside, Will finds Thor and Lily sitting at the table, so he waves to them in greeting. Will is a well-known alchemist, but recently, he stopped making potions. Curious, Lily asks him why, and Will replies that he's stopped for now, because his main focus is gathering information. Merlin then asks about Lloyd, and Will tells them that Lloyd was kicked out of the hero team. Merlin is shocked at the news, but Will quickly reassures her that Lloyd has now joined an S-rank adventure party. Hearing this, the others are stunned, since none of them ever expected something like that from Lloyd. Meanwhile, Lloyd stands on a balcony, looking down nervously at the huge crowd who had come just to see him. That's when his party members arrive to check on him. Lloyd asks them why everyone keeps chasing him around. Cross tells him to relax, explaining that the people are only here because they want to show their gratitude for saving them. But Lloyd insists that he only provided minor assistance to those who were actually on the front lines. Hearing this, Yui gets annoyed that Lloyd keeps putting himself down. Dagas bluntly tells Lloyd that he's setting impossible standards for himself and only torturing his own heart. Lena steps forward with a serious expression and firmly tells Lloyd that he needs to start having more confidence in his own abilities. The story then shifts back to Will, who is telling his companions that the real problem with Lloyd is that he's simply too earnest. Because of that, he never truly recognizes the extent of his own capabilities. Merlin looks worried as she says she doesn't want Lloyd to repeat the same mistake she once made. Meanwhile, Lloyd goes downstairs to meet the citizens waiting for him. The moment they see him, they cheer loudly and shower him with praise. Lloyd tries to explain that it was really the knights on the front lines who should be receiving this kind of recognition, not him. But one of the knights steps forward and says it was only thanks to Lloyd's enhancement magic that they were able to fight at all. The citizens agree and begin chanting Lloyd's name as their hero. Lloyd feels overwhelmed at being treated like a hero, but Dagas just tells him to relax and enjoy it. After hesitating, Lloyd finally accepts their praise. Meanwhile, Alan is furious when he hears the news that Lloyd has been hailed as a hero. His own party members immediately recognize the danger of this, knowing that if things continue, their official hero titles might be revoked since they refuse to accept the emergency mission. Frustrated, Alan orders his team to pack their things, saying they're leaving town immediately because he refuses to stay in a place where Lloyd is celebrated as a hero. At the same time, Will and his companions sit together, and Thor guesses that Will didn't call them there just for drinks, but to honor Sybil. Will smirks and admits it's true. He then explains that the demon race has been controlling monsters to try and conquer Ishtar, using the orc's magic as a tool to do it. What he doesn't understand is why the demon army would choose to act so aggressively at a time like this. That leads him to suspect that the Demon King has returned. Hearing this, Merlin stands up immediately in shock, insisting that can't be true because the Demon King was already vanquished. Thor tells her to calm down, reminding her that panicking won't solve anything. The group agrees that if they want to protect the future, they have to do everything in their power. The next day, Lloyd and his party are summoned by the Lord of Ishtar to discuss the city's protection. As they wait outside, they wonder nervously what the Lord will be like, especially since none of them even know what he looks like. Just then, a man who looks like a butler approaches them and invites them inside. When they enter, they are surprised to see Claire. They ask if she was also summoned by the Lord, but the man quickly clarifies that she is his honored guest. He then introduces himself as Lord Abel Lucas, the true Lord of Ishtar. Everyone is stunned and quickly apologize for not addressing him properly, since they assumed he was a butler or even a gardener. Abel asks why they are so surprised, and they explain that they had always heard the Lord of Ishtar had ruled for decades, so they expected him to be much older. Abel laughs lightly and explains that he really is elderly, but he uses youth enhancement magic on himself, which is why he appears so young. Everyone takes a sit, and Abel reveals that Claire is actually the second princess of the Forest Empire. Everyone is shocked to hear this. None of them ever imagined she was such an important figure. Abel adds that because Claire's rare ability to control monsters is so valuable, they cannot allow her to be captured by the demon race. That is why the Empire has been searching for her. Abel then presents the group with a sealed envelope and explains their next mission. They are to escort Claire safely to Sylphs, the royal capital of the Kingdom of Furin, where her people will be waiting to retrieve her. Everyone is stunned by this request, since escort missions of this importance are usually handled by knights, not adventurers. Abel explains that he chose not to send knights because they would attract far too much attention, and the demon race would quickly catch on. In the end, Lloyd and his party accept the mission, and so, the very next day, they set out together to begin their journey toward the royal capital. That was episode 7. Subscribe to not miss the next part and watch the next video on screen.